Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Togo's opposition accuses the government of using excessive force in pushing back against protesters who took to the streets over the weekend. At least 4 people have been killed since Saturday. Also, the Congolese doctor who shares this year's Nobel Peace Prize calls for more to be done internationally to face down injustice. Dr. Denis Mukwege speaks as he receives his prize money in Oslo. And Africa needs science and science needs women. We hear from one of the organisers of the Women in Science Africa Award about the challenges and achievements of female STEM professionals from the continent. But first, Togo's oppositions accused the government of using excessive force in a crackdown on protesters over the weekend. Hundreds of people took to the streets to call for upcoming legislative elections to be put on hold. At least 2 people were killed in the capital, Lomé, on Saturday. Another 2 were shot dead in Togo Province on Monday. Clément Bonero tells us more.
Denouncing a violent crackdown in Togo, Jean-Pierre Fabre, the country's main opposition leader, has accused the army of having opened fire on protesters on Saturday.
We strongly condemn the acts of violence that were carried out by security forces and police, with the help of the Togolese armed forces.
Hundreds took to the streets across the country over the weekend after calls from a coalition of 14 opposition parties. Here in Agoe, near the capital, violent clashes erupted between security forces and protesters. Members of the opposition have been calling on the government to delay the upcoming legislative elections on the 20th of December, citing irregularities. They've also asked for a reform of the country's electoral commission, which they say is biased against the opposition. The government, meanwhile, had banned the protests, saying they posed a high risk of disturbances to public order.
They have chosen not to take part in the elections. I respect their decision, but they should not prevent others from campaigning.
Togo has been going through a serious political crisis for over a year, with massive demonstrations being held across the country calling for the resignation of President Faure Gnassingbé. Gnassingbé, who succeeded his father in 2005, has been accused of trying to change the constitution in order to retain his grip on power until at least 2025.
The EU's renewed sanctions against President Joseph Kabila's chosen successor just weeks before tense elections are due to be held in DR Congo. Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari and 13 other people will continue to face travel bans. Shadari was sanctioned last year for obstructing the country's electoral process and over his connections to a violent crackdown on protesters, angry over President Kabila staying in power beyond the end of his mandate. While critics of the government are still worried that he is hoping to delay polls once again, our Thomas Nicolon tells us more.
In life, as in politics, I don't rule out anything. This is what Joseph Kabila told Reuters on Sunday, meaning that he might consider seeking a 3rd term in 2023. It was unclear until recently if he would try to run for a 3rd consecutive term, but he will be eligible to run again after a break. But before that, the next presidential election is due to be held on the 23rd of December this year in Congo, and Joseph Kabila handpicked a loyalist named Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari to run for the ruling coalition, even though Shadari is under European sanctions for human rights violations, and many say that he's there to serve 1 term before Kabila returns. Now, international observers say insecurity will make it difficult for the vast equatorial country to hold an election and creating maybe an opportunity for Kabila's coalition to cheat, especially with the use of the new voting machines. But Joseph Kabila told Reuters that Congo is ready to hold fair elections.
That was Thomas Nicolon there for us. Now, we must all take a stand. Dr. Denis Mukwege, the Congolese doctor who shares this year's Nobel Peace Prize, has called for more to be done internationally to face down injustice. As he received his prize money in Oslo, Mukwege urged the global community to face down leaders who abuse their populations. He asked consumers to insist that products are manufactured with respect for human dignity and said that victims of sexual violence committed as weapons of war should receive reparations. Mukwege is the founder of a hospital in eastern DR Congo, where for the last 20 years he's treated tens of thousands of victims of conflict.
Agir, c'est un choix de soutenir ou non une femme.
It is a choice whether or not to support a woman, whether or not to protect her, whether or not to defend her rights, whether or not to fight on her side in countries ravaged by conflict. It is a choice whether or not to build peace in the countries in conflict. Taking action means saying no to indifference. If there is a war to be waged, it is the war against the indifference which is eating away at our societies.
Qui ronge nos sociétés aujourd'hui.
Now, leaders and representatives from over 160 countries were in Morocco on Monday to adopt a United Nations Pact on global migration. However, though it's a non-binding agreement, since it was finalised in July, a string of countries have withdrawn their support. The United States was one of the first countries to ditch the deal last year. Alison Sargent tells us more.
It is the first ever global agreement on migration. And even if the document is purely symbolic, for the United Nations, its adoption is historic.
We are on the eve of a truly remarkable moment in the pursuit of the better management of international migration, a singular issue of our time.
The Pact is a non-binding text that lays the groundwork for better cooperation between countries. It lists basic guidelines for working with migrants, 23 objectives that include collecting data on migration, ensuring migrants have proof of legal identity, using detention only as a last resort, strengthening the transnational response to migrant smuggling, and making it easier for migrants to return to their home countries safely and with dignity. Because the text is non-binding, states cannot be punished for failing to comply. But that hasn't stopped right-wing political groups from claiming that the deal will undermine state sovereignty.
We see that in some European countries and in the United States, this question has become an issue for politicians. It seems to me they're using it for their narrow partisan interests.
Right-wing governments in a handful of European countries, including Italy, Austria, Hungary and Poland, have all pulled out of the deal. In the end, only 2/3 of the 192 countries who approved the text in New York were in Marrakesh to see it adopted.
Now, Africa needs more scientists, and an important part of efforts to achieve that is the clearing away of the obstacles faced by women from the continent who work or aspire to work in science, technology, engineering and mathematics. In a bid to do that, for the last 9 years, the Loreal Foundation has been partnered with UNESCO for the Women in Science programme in giving out regional fellowships across sub-Saharan Africa. This month, for the first time, the award ceremony was held in Kenya, where 14 emerging female scientists from Ghana, Kenya, Mauritius, Nigeria and South Africa were honoured. Now, organisers say it's all about empowering and recognising African female scientific talent. Well, Alexandra Palt is the Executive Vice President from the Loreal Foundation, and she joins us now. Alexandra, thanks so much for coming to speak to us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've said in the past that the world needs science and science needs women. How does that apply specifically to the situation in Africa?
Yes, you're right. The world needs science, and that is particularly true in Africa. For the continent, it's climate change, poverty alleviation, it's about biodiversity, so many issues. So we need science-based answers to these issues. And so science-based answers cannot be found without half of the population's talents, who are women, their creativity, their competences, their expertise. So this is the reason why now for the last 20 years all around the world, and for the last 9 years on the continent, the Loreal Foundation is supporting with UNESCO the women scientists, excellent women scientists.
And what kind of women scientists have you been supporting?
Well, actually, it's a wide range. They can be from computer scientists, engineers, a lot of biologists, biochemists. Well, we have a really big range of scientists. They are evaluated by an independent jury of scientists for their scientific excellence. So these 14 young women were selected among 488 candidates for being the best fellows that we could find on the continent.
And awards are great, but what do laureates, the prize winners, get from being named as being winners.
So they have a grant to do their doctoral or postdoctoral research, and additionally we give training to them. What is one of the obstacles women face and scientific women face is that they are excellent scientists, but in order to succeed you need much more skills, especially if you want to break the glass ceiling, meaning to get to highest level positions. So we train them in management, leadership, communication skills, media training, negotiation, skills that will help them to progress faster and further in their careers.
Now, originally, the Sub-Saharan African program was in South Africa, but then you actually split it into two separate prizes, one specifically for South Africa and one for the rest of the region. Why did you feel the need to do that?
Yes, we did this year, so we announced it in Nairobi. South Africa has invested massively in research and innovation and in women researchers. So 45% of researchers in South Africa are women researchers, compared to 30% on the rest of the continent and in world average. And the big investment in science also lead to scientific excellence that makes South Africa a little bit apart in the picture of the continent. So we need to invest more in African women scientists who come from other sub-Saharan African countries in order to be able to support them. So we basically doubled the number of fellowships in order to have 8 for South Africa and 20 for the rest of the continent.
And do you feel that female scientists or women working in STEM industries, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, face different obstacles to those faced by women working in STEM elsewhere in the world?
Well, they face, I think, obstacles in a stronger way. All around the world, there are stereotypes, bias around women scientists. There are issues about work-life balance. The expectations to African women is even stronger. What a lot of African scientists told me, especially the young women we discuss with, is very often people tell them, how long are you going to continue to study before bringing back some money? And then when are you going to found a family? When are you going to get married? So a lot about gender roles and also about sharing the load in order to guarantee a better work-life balance is very important. So there are additional, I think, force and strengths in the obstacles they face, and they have to be even stronger than women elsewhere in order to pursue their science careers.
And do you think that there's a crossover from some of the difficulties that you've just mentioned for women working in STEM to obstacles faced by women in trying to get to the forefront of other industries?
Well, it's clear that what we see in STEM, the glass ceiling is everywhere a reality. What you see in STEM is that when you look in leadership positions, you have around 10% of leadership positions of women leading scientific institutions. So there is a strong glass ceiling. You have the same when you look into CEOs around the biggest companies and so on. So we all face the reality of glass ceiling. I think the issue is that in the corporate world, we are talking about and working against it for now quite some time. So we are more aware and more open about it. And we have to encourage women scientists also to be aware that they are facing a glass ceiling and that we have to fight in order to have the position that they deserve.
Thanks very much. Alexandra Palt there from the Loreal Foundation, which sponsors the Women in Science Africa program. Now, a Ugandan journalist and poet and the Nigerian writer have jointly won the Wole Soyinka Prize for Literature. Harriet Anina is the first Ugandan to receive the honour. She won with her book of poetry, A Nation of Labour, a work that's been dubbed a collection of social conscious poetry. She received a $10,000 award alongside Nigeria's Tanure Ojaide, who wrote Songs of Myself. Well, congrats to both from Eye on Africa. That is, though, sadly, where we're going to have to leave it for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.